Hey, Kevin, thanks for being on the show.
Glad to join you. Looking forward to it.
Delighted to have you here. So let's get started. Let's start off with a set of rapid fire questions. What is the one myth or misconception about lobbying?
Well, I think quite often people who aren't familiar with lobbyists uh, and watch maybe too much House of Cards um, thinks that it's a less than reputable profession. I think a lot of people think of lavish dinners and golf outings and beach resorts and things like that. And while I wish that were all true, it is a lot different in real life. It's a profession that I've been involved with for about 25 years or over 25 years at this point, and it's much different than the public perception. So it's one of those things you have to almost experience in order to understand.
Okay. What would you be if you weren't a lobbyist?
It's a good question. I started my career in the insurance industry. So if I hadn't discovered lobbying, I may well be an insurance underwriter at this point, sitting in a cubicle somewhere. So I am quite glad that I was exposed to lobbying early in my career. It's probably much more exciting than sitting in the cubicle underwriting insurance policies.
What are the three skills you think are essential for someone to be a good lobbyist?
First and foremost, I think an effective lobbyist has to have a really deep understanding of the issues they're working on. So in my case, I've been working on telecommunications issues for 22 years. And knowing a lot about your subject matter, I think is critical. And the best lobbyists I've ever worked with are the people who know most about that subject. So that's one. Second one would probably be the ability to see issues from all angles and to sit in other people's shoes, not just your own. So understand who you're dealing with, understand their point of view, understand that they may have to deal with competing interests and competing points of view. So, being able to see things through their eyes is very important. And then a third thing would be, I think it's critical to be effective. Lobbyists have to have their personal points of view be very close to what they're advocating. If you don't, it comes through. So I think if your personal point of view is very close to what you're advocating on behalf of, then you're going to be much more effective.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite book or hobby?
Sure. My favorite book is probably Team of Rivals, which came out like 15 years ago, about President Lincoln. And I'm sort of a Lincoln fan. I've read a lot of books about Lincoln, but that's probably my favorite. It taught me a lot of lessons when I read it, and I still try to remind myself of them time to time, is to always look for the opportunity to make an adversary an ally, if possible.
Mm-hmm. What is your favorite destination spot?
Uh, I will say that I'm not sure it's my favorite, but it's places we go a lot. It's we try to go to the beach and the mountains on a regular basis. Our favorite beach spot is Kiowa, South Carolina. We have a place down there, and we go down there quite often. And then we love to go to the mountains, and we love my wife and I love to hang out in Asheville, North Carolina. So we go up there quite often as well, kind of back and forth, kind of a triangle between Atlanta, Asheville, and Kiowa, keep us fairly busy.
Yes, I love Asheville. What is the one thing you want to share with our audience which no one else knows about you?
I will say that some people know about it, but many people are surprised when I tell them that I am a dual citizen. I'm a United States citizen and was obviously born in the United States, but I am also an Irish citizen of the Republic of Ireland. So I have two passports and two citizenships. I've had my Irish citizenship for maybe 20, 25 years. So many people are surprised by that when I tell them that, because I don't have much of an Irish accent. So they don't think that I would be anything but an American citizen.
But I bet you love beer though, right?
I do tend to like to have a Guinness or two from time to time. Yes.
Well, with that, let's jump into your past. Let's talk a little bit about your childhood. Where did you grow up and how was it like?
I grew up in Dunwoody, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. At the time, it wasn't a city. Now it's a city, but just outside the perimeter here in Atlanta area. Went to elementary school, high school in Dunwoody, and so I spent a good portion of my youth there.
Okay, and were you an academic or were you more interested in extracurricular activities like sports or anything like that?
I really I guess in high school I was probably more interested in sports and music and things like that than I was academics. I did okay in school, but I can't say I was an academic. I wish I was, but I'm hoping my children are academics more than I was. But I was probably more interested in sports in high school than I was academics.
Ah, nice. And were you interested back then in governments or political affairs or anything like that?
I really was not. I grew up in a family that really wasn't very politically active. We didn't discuss politics over the dinner table. I have, looking back on it, I think my parents were sort of moderate Republicans, but they didn't really espouse political views very often. So it wasn't an environment I grew up in, and therefore I really wasn't exposed to it until kind of later in my life.
Ah, okay. So what I saw that you're on your profile that you got a bachelor's in business administration and risk management and insurance. So why did you pick that course?
Oh, I went to the University of Georgia to study business. I knew I wanted to study business. My father was in business. My father worked in the steel industry his whole career, but I knew I wanted to study business. Wasn't sure what kind of business studies I wanted to concentrate in. I was originally a finance major at Georgia, and I took a risk management class, sort of the introductory risk management class as an elective, and I really liked it. To me, it kind of spoke to a way of thinking about subjects and about issues, sort of the cost benefit analysis of just about everything you do. So to me, it was a little bit more specific than finance. And so after that introductory course, I switched my major to risk management because, like I said, it just sort of struck a chord with me.
So you went to University of Georgia until 1990, and then it looks like you started working as an insurance agent. Is that right?
No, I was an employee benefits rep. I worked for an insurance company, and I called on insurance agents and brokers. So I was sort of a middleman between the insurance company. I represented the insurance company and worked on employee benefit cases with agents and brokers. So, when say Coca-Cola's benefits were out to bid, our company would be one of the ones who bid on that account via an insurance broker or agent. So I worked between the insurance company and the broker.
Interesting. So you did that for about 5 years, and then you got a master's degree again in risk management and insurance. Is that right?
I did. I always joke with people that I know a lot about risk management insurance, and I don't use it other than to renew my auto and homeowners insurance once a year. But I do have a master's degree in from Georgia State in risk management as well.
Oh, sweet. Okay. So if I had to like bundle up that entire experience you had with insurance and risk management, can you maybe expose what skills you gained, which you are currently, utilizing it in your government affairs?
Like I said earlier, it's sort of a way of looking at issues and looking at problems and kind of looking at most of the things that face you in your career. It kind of teaches you a cost benefit analysis on everything you do. Risk reward, I think, is a good way of looking at everything. It's sort of how I naturally looked at things anyway, but it reinforced that risk management. And while I don't use the product and information very often in my career today, it's more of a way of thinking that I do use every day. and has been very useful in my career. And I think it would have been really useful in a lot of different careers. But risk management actually got me into my career because I was sort of a product and expert, and started working on legislative affairs from more of a product expertise point of view. And that got me into lobbying. And then I've obviously switched fields to make it sort of my career.
So yes, let's talk a little bit about that, because at some point there was a trigger where you switched your careers from insurance and then you moved into legislative affairs. So what happened and what was the trigger behind it?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go work for the state insurance commissioner here in Georgia in the early 90s. And in Georgia, the insurance commissioner is a statewide elected official, constitutional officer. And so I went to go work for him as sort of his policy advisor on health insurance issues initially, and worked my way up through that office to become his press secretary, and then eventually became his chief of staff at the end of his term. And part of that, part of my responsibilities was dealing with the General Assembly. So that was the first time I'd ever stepped foot, I think, in the state capitol in my entire life. That opened my eyes to the whole General Assembly and how government affairs works. Also working for the insurance commissioner, since it was a political office, it opened my eyes to politics. I had never really been that involved in politics before. So it kind of made me pivot from being an insurance person to being more interested in public affairs and government affairs.
Interesting. So like, can you maybe perhaps, like, let's say if someone who's listening to this and they wanted to get their feet wet in legislative affairs, can you perhaps tell us, like, what would be an ideal step for them to get into it?
Yeah, I would encourage them to probably look for an opportunity to intern with either a business lobby or contract lobbyists that work at the Capitol. If they believe that's something that's interesting to them, I think the only way to really know is to try it and see if it's for you. I know a lot of people who have thought they wanted to be lobbyists and tried it and really didn't like it very much and decided to do something else. And I think there's probably people like me who never really gave it much consideration, stumbled across it via something in their career, and decided that that was something they wanted to pursue as a career. So I think exposure to the profession is critical, because it's, like I said at the beginning, it's a much different career and much different job than most people think it is.
So maybe for the next, from 1995 to 1999, I see most of your experience has been in legislative affairs. Is that an accurate statement?
Correct. Yeah. Since 95 on, most of my experience has been dealing with state government. I primarily focus on state government, the General Assembly, the governor's office. I do a little bit of federal affairs, but not a lot. And I've done some local government affairs over that period of time as well.
Okay. And I see that you were also an executive director at the Georgia Association of Health Plans. Maybe tell us, like, how did you get that position and what kind of responsibilities did you have?
Sure. I did legislative affairs for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Georgia right after I left the insurance commissioner's office. And they were one of the members of the Georgia Association of Health Plans, and they were looking to hire their first executive director, which represents all the major health insurers in the state. And I was fortunate enough to be selected to be their first executive director. Had a board of directors of 8 to 10 people that I dealt with on a regular basis. I was the chief spokesperson for the industry in the state, and also the chief lobbyist for the industry at the state capitol. So those are sort of my primary responsibilities as executive director of the Georgia Association of Health Plans.
I see. So it sounds like you had some really good background in insurance, and then you gradually worked into the health insurance field, and because of your knowledge in that and you combining your exposure to the legislative affairs, it looks like it was a good amalgamation of all of those together. Is that how you think it progressed?
Exactly. I mean, I kind of had a knowledge of a subject area, risk management, insurance, and I always specialized in health and welfare benefits. So employee benefits, health plans, etc. So that was always my focus educationally, and that morphed into me being stumbling across the public affairs aspect of that industry, and then after a while, pivoted off that to doing other subject matters outside of insurance.
So now, after your position there at the Georgia Association of Health Plans, you moved on to being the region manager at AT&T, and you progressed there to be the assistant vice president at the legislative affairs. So can you please talk us through, how did you progress into that role and what your responsibilities were?
Yeah, sure. When I first joined what was then Bell South, I was responsible for Southeast Georgia. I lived in Savannah, Georgia, and I had the whole coastal area of the state of Georgia, doing all external affairs activities. And then in 2004, moved back to Atlanta with Bell South, originally to do communications work, media relations for the company. And then fairly shortly, because of an illness on our team, they asked me to go back to the Capitol to lobby again. So I, starting in late 2004, went back to lobbying, which is what I had done for most of the decade before, for the insurance industry, and did that on behalf of Bell South, which became AT&T, for about 17 additional years at the Capitol, ending late last year.
And can you talk us through what kind of policies did you work on while you were at AT&T?
Sure. Worked on everything telecommunications related, being wireless, wireline, cable or video issues, tax issues. AT&T has a large employee base in the state of Georgia, so just about everything that affected corporate America would affect us because of the depth of employees around the state. And so I got to work on a lot of different issues, mostly public utility type or telecommunications issues for quite a while. And that's an ever-changing industry. So the issues never really got stale.
And can you think of, I am a personal believer that you learn more from your mistakes than your successes. So can you tell us what kind of, any specific incident or any policy you worked on, challenging project which you failed at, and what did you learn from it?
Let's see. Yeah, I had quite a few issues where it took a lot longer than you thought it was going to take in order to achieve your goal. So I'll probably focus on that as the answer. Quite a few of the issues I worked on over the years were controversial and took 2 years to get through the General Assembly as opposed to 1 year. So obviously the goal was always to do it in 1 year, but a lot of times you had to lay the groundwork in year one in order to pass the bill in year two. Sometimes having some sort of a study process over the summer between the two sessions to flesh the issue out a little bit more. So obviously you always go in with the highest hopes to do things quickly, but typically if they're controversial, they take a little longer. So quite a few of the more controversial issues I worked on in telecommunications took a little longer than expected, but ultimately got a good result.
And after your 20 odd years with AT&T, you decided to move on, and now you're at Georgia EMC. What made you move, and what is your role here?
Sure. Yeah. Great opportunity arose last year where Georgia EMC was looking for a new head of their government relations team. Their senior vice president of government relations had retired, and they were looking for a new head of their government relations shop within Georgia EMC. And I saw that as a great opportunity to learn some new things. Never spent much time working on electric issues or power issues in the past. had always been around those issues because they're in the Utilities Committee, which I worked for many years, but never was intimately involved. I always found them interesting. So after 23 years working on telecommunications issues, I figured it was a great transition. There are a lot of similarities between telecommunications and power. So got the opportunity, moved over to Georgia EMC in late October of last year, and have really enjoyed the challenge.
And just to describe it to the layman, what does Georgia EMC do?
Georgia EMC is, most people would refer to it as a trade association that represents the electric co-ops in the state of Georgia. There are 41 electric cooperatives in Georgia, which makes us one of the largest states in the country for electric cooperatives. Represents those folks at the Capitol and before the state agencies and the federal government, and the entire sort of co-op ecosystem, everything from electric distribution to electric generation, electric transmission issues. Work collaboratively with some of our partners in the industry like Oglethorpe Power, Georgia Transmission, et cetera, to try to get a good outcome for our members who serve about 4.5 million Georgians for electric power throughout the state. So that pretty much keeps us busy full time.
And looking back at your entire distinguished career, if you had to distill it and give us like one tip which you have to do in government relations and one tip you're not supposed to do, what would those be?
Well, I think the one thing to do, at least in my experience, has always been know your issues inside and out, because anybody can advocate on behalf of an issue or a subject, but unless they really understand that issue or subject, they're not going to be very effective. So really digging into the issues you work on, making sure you understand them much better than anybody else you talk to is critical to success, in my opinion. And that's what I try to do throughout my career, is really dig in. That's in the process. I'm in the process of digging into electric and power issues right now and learning a lot every day, which is kind of exciting after doing this for quite a long time. So the thing to not do is, quite frankly, all lobbyists must play within the rules. And that's one thing that everyone must do. And if they don't do that, then A, they're probably shouldn't be in this profession. And B, eventually they'll probably won't be in this profession much longer. So playing by the rules and making sure you comply with the standards expected of lobbyists who do the job in the right way is, in my opinion, extremely important and pivotal to making sure we as an industry have a good reputation and have some semblance of respect when we talk about our issues.
And one question which I am always curious to know is, you have a lot of legislators at the assembly and probably staff as well. So you're playing a game of like relationships. How do you strive to keep those relationships and, have a strong networking?
Yeah, that's been really challenging over the last 2 years with the advent of COVID. I think I really have now realized how important those relationships are and how important it is to continually keep them up to date. After 2 years of a lot of challenges with talking to people in person. But I think I appreciate relationships even more than I did before. But I think it's just human nature that you must be present to win. You have to be in the room when things happen and maintain those relationships, so that if you're not there, the people will give you a heads up as to what's transpiring. And literally those relationships need to be established over many years. So there's a lot of trust flowing both ways. The challenge we've had in the last, 2 or 3 decades in Georgia has been, we've had a lot of turnover in the General Assembly. So I think this year we'll have 50 plus new members starting next year. And that makes it challenging when you have 236 legislators and 50 of them are new. to try to keep up with all the folks as they turn over. I mean, so that makes our job even more challenging, and finding the opportunity to spend some time with everybody who's been elected to the General Assembly is it's really challenging, but it's something that's really valuable if you can get to do it. And it takes putting a lot of miles on your car and eating a lot of meat in 3 restaurants around the state, but it pays off in the end.
Nice. With that, let's talk a little bit about your future or your current position at Georgia EMC, or anything goes here. Like, you can talk about what are the types of wisdom you would like to share for our listeners. Anything is open.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about our industry. It's an industry I think is largely misunderstood by the public. In fact, sometimes in cocktail parties, I use a different name for what I do from lobbyist, because you get kind of weird looks if you use the word lobbyist, but you talk about government relations or dealing with the government. So I think it's a really noble profession. I've enjoyed spending about 30 years doing this. So I think it's something that I hope good people get into over the years, because they can really make a difference working on issues. I feel like I'm lucky enough to have worked on a lot of important issues over the years. And when I decide to hang it up eventually, I'll be able to look back and say, I think I made a difference to the good for the state of Georgia and the citizens of the state. So I'm just glad to participate in your podcast.
Well, Kevin, this has been a pleasure and a delight to have you on the show. Thanks again for so much for being here. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you.